But there's a tenor ukulele. I am still not done with the full album that we recorded. It's all done, mixed, being mastered, just finishing it up. Haven't paid for it all yet. But now I have an EP in the works, 3 new songs. Gotta get back in the studio. Just got back from Atlanta, spoke at an event there, had a really good time, ran in heat and humidity that does not exist where I live at the moment. Running a half hour in that kind of heat and humidity, I did the math on it. It's like running 17.2 hours in the weather that is outside my door right now. It's the first event I've spoken at in a while. I had one set last year, but then a hurricane canceled the event. And so this was the first one since COVID. I loved getting back in front of people. However, this is my bone to pick. And given that it was a veg fest, there was no actual bones. What is missing from the conversation of health and happiness are the big questions and potentially the big answers. And that means before you go to a lecture on heart disease, before you focus on a scale weight, before you focus on diabetes, before you focus on cancer, it's not that it's all fine to eat healthy and to try to avoid those things and, decrease your chances of getting them. But I am a staunch believer that taking time to ask the big questions will actually yield you the life that you want. And that comes well before your 19-point-second lecture on protein. We get deep in the weeds, and a lot of it has to do with this whole thing, social media. It's worse than ever now. But we tend to jump right into the weeds of the details of our perceived goals. We think we want to minimize the chances of getting diabetes, and so we don't ask the big questions of the life we want to live because we think it's not related to diabetes, but it totally is related to diabetes. Why don't you want to get diabetes? Why don't you want to get cancer? Why do you want to have more energy? Why do you want to be able to run a marathon or an ultra marathon or do some race, whatever? Why do you want to spend more time with your children? Why do you want to spend more time with your spouse? Why do you want to travel around the world? In theory, it's because we have a goal in mind, an ideal in mind of the life we want to live. But we don't ever ask those questions, and there's a lot of noise in the world, and it's preventing us from asking those questions. But just a few minutes here and there to ask those big questions. What do I stand for? What are my ideals? What do I really want out of life? How do I actually see myself independent of how I've been behaving for the last 20 years? These are the big questions. They're not being asked. They're not being asked at these events. They're not being asked in culture. They're the philosophy of living. They're about the bigger picture of life. And before we get deep in the weeds on grams of this and that and inflammation and all these things, very important, mind you, but they're down the line. They're not what's most important to settle first. Those are things to come later. They're not as sexy, the bigger questions, because we want to get deep in the weeds. We want somebody to tell us exactly what to do. We want to be able to measure, count, and weigh everything. But the bigger questions, the stuff that nobody can help us answer, the things that we have to grapple with in solitude, in silence, in quiet, those are the things we tackle first to live a good life. The other things come much, much later.